The air was thick with dust and whispers of the condemned. Every breath burned like iron scraped against my lungs, and every heartbeat echoed through the tunnels like the ticking of a broken clock. There was no sunrise here, no sky, only the faint, sour glow of chem lamps and the endless rumble of machinery gnawing through stone. They said this place was once a world with oceans, forests, and light. Now it is a wound that never healed, a penal world where faith is tested and mercy forgotten. I was sent here not as a hero, not as a soldier, but as a number branded into flesh. A sinner in the eyes of the Imperium. And yet in the endless dark beneath the Emperor's light I began to understand the horrifying truth. The penal worlds were never meant for punishment alone. They were engines of despair, built to feed the machine of a dying empire. Before I tell you what I saw, breathe slowly. The air is heavy here. The silence hums with old prayers and broken names. If you've ever wondered what it truly means to be forgotten by the Imperium, to live where hope is outlawed and the stars are a myth, then stay with me. I will show you what remains when faith is tested beyond reason, when even death feels like mercy. And while we walk through this shadowed world together, remember to subscribe, to share this story, to let others drift with us through the echoes of the Imperium. Your presence, even in silence, gives this memory meaning. Now let's begin. The descent. I remember the hum before the descent. It wasn't the sound of engines. It was the sound of confinement. A deep, endless vibration that crawled into the bones. Inside the transport ship, light barely existed. The lumen strips flickered above us, each flash revealing rows of faces chained and silent, their eyes dulled by weeks of stasis sleep and interrogation. The air was sour, heavy with sweat and recirculated breath. Somewhere in the dark, a man whispered a prayer to the Emperor, his voice trembling like the hull around us. We had been drifting for what felt like forever, suspended between judgment and oblivion. The guards called us cargo. To them, we were no longer men, just bodies to be delivered. The chains around my wrist were cold, but not colder than the thought that no one would ever know my name again. Through the narrow grate near the ceiling, I could see faint movement, servitors, half flesh, half machine, tending to the transport's internal systems. Their metal limbs clanked softly as they adjusted the containment pods. I had seen servitors before on the world where I was taken, but these had no eyes, only sockets filled with pulsing light. I often wondered if they were once prisoners, too, those who disobeyed one time too many, condemned not to die but to serve forever. A shrill tone echoed through the Vox grill above us, followed by a voice stripped of all warmth. Descent protocol commencing. Impact shields active. Cargo units prepare for planetary entry. Somewhere ahead I heard someone retching. Another man began to cry softly, trying to smother the sound with his shoulder. None of us spoke to him. No one offered comfort. In the penal worlds, weakness was not pitied. It was contagious. The walls began to tremble as the ship shifted from void to atmosphere. I felt my stomach rise, weightless for an instant, before gravity slammed back down like an iron hand. The roar outside grew deafening. Through the trembling hull, it sounded like the planet itself was screaming. Then came the heat. The air thickened, and a crimson glow bled through the cracks of the bulkhead as the descent flares ignited. The light cast everything in shades of blood and rust. I saw the prisoner across from me, his skin blistered with old burns, his head shaven clean except for the Aquila brand carved into his scalp. He stared right at me, eyes hollow, lips moving soundlessly. Maybe he was praying. Maybe he was cursing. In this place, the two were often the same. When the ship finally broke through the storm layer, I caught my first glimpse of the world below through a narrow viewport. Cartha 9, a world of red dust, broken mountains, and black rivers of slag cutting across its surface. Lightning crawled through clouds of ash like veins of fire. There was no blue sky, no sea, no life, only the endless churn of storms that had raged for centuries. And this was where they sent us. The penal world waited like a beast, jaws open, ready to swallow. The impact came without warning. The ship struck the landing zone hard enough to throw us against our chains. Sparks filled the hold, I tasted metal and blood. When the noise settled, the silence that followed was worse. It wasn't relief. It was expectation, the pause before new suffering began. The bulkhead doors groaned open, releasing a rush of acrid air. The stench of promethium ash and rot clawed at my throat. A thin layer of dust drifted in, glowing faintly under the lumen light. Outside, shapes moved, guards in carapace armor, their faces hidden behind rebreathers, their visors reflecting the glow of the landing fires. They called us out by number one by one. When it was my turn, the enforcer's gauntlet clamped around my arm like a vice. He pulled me into the open storm. The air burned cold, biting through the thin fabric of the penal rags. The ground beneath, my feet was redstone, worn smooth by countless boots before mine. Around us stretched the landing pit, an immense crater lined with spiked barriers and watchtowers. The banners of the Imperial Aquila hung limp in the poisoned wind. From the towers came the sound of vox speakers, blaring the same phrase over and over in a dozen languages. To serve is to suffer. To suffer is to be cleansed. The Emperor sees. The Emperor forgives. But the words felt hollow. The guards herded us toward a massive gate built into the cliffside. The metal doors were carved with images of angels and chains, worn smooth by centuries of sand and corrosion. Above them, in faded script, was the planet's decree: Carthanine, labor redeems the faithless. The gate shuddered and opened. A wave of heat rolled out, carrying with it the sounds of machinery, screams, and the endless grind of industry. The penal world welcomed us home. I stepped into the darkness, leaving the last flicker of daylight behind. And in that moment, as the doors closed behind me with a thunderous boom, I realized something I could never unlearn. This wasn't a prison. It was a graveyard that still breathed. The air inside the gate was heavier, almost liquid. It wrapped around the lungs and refused to leave. I could taste iron and oil in every breath, the scent of machinery and misery fused into one. The corridor ahead glowed with dim amber light, the kind that makes every shadow seem alive. Chains rattled with each step as the guards marched us deeper, our boots scraping against metal grates slick with condensation. Somewhere above, hidden machinery roared like a sleeping god. It was said that Carthanine was built in layers, the upper levels for processing, the middle for mining, and the lowest for the dead. We were heading downward toward the furnace levels where no man ever saw the sky again. The enforcer leading our line barked orders through his vox grill, his voice distorted and hollow. No speech, no deviation. Keep eyes forward. Redemption through labor, salvation through pain. I kept my eyes low, not out of fear but because there was nothing worth seeing. The walls were covered in scripture, burned in prayers, desperate carvings left by those who came before us. Most were half erased, their words overlapping into chaos. Only fragments remained legible. Forgive us. He watches. We endure. A soft hiss echoed behind me, followed by a muffled scream. I turned just enough to see a prisoner drop to the floor, his body convulsing. The guard beside him withdrew a shock baton slick with blood. No one reacted. We had already learned the rules. Every sound, every movement, every spark of individuality was a rebellion. At the end of the corridor, a massive chamber opened before us, the processing hall. Rows of cogitator terminals blinked dimly under the watch of servitors. They moved in slow, perfect rhythm, each motion rehearsed 1,000 times before their minds were erased. Data slates clattered onto metal trays stamped with fresh serials. As we entered, a high-ranking overseer, identified by the black cog of the Mechanicus etched into his armor, looked up from his terminal. New intake, he rasped. Designation begins with CYX Delta. He didn't look at our faces. To him, we were equations, inputs, numbers that kept his machine of penance running. One by one, we were called forward. They burned the serial onto our necks with a white-hot brand. When it touched my skin, the pain was clean, almost holy in its precision. The stench of seared flesh mingled with the ever-present tang of promethium. The mark read, CYXD 1173. My old name was gone. The Emperor had erased it. After branding, we were herded toward the labor zone. The ceiling rose high into darkness filled with catwalks, pipes, and chains swaying in the heat. Sparks rained from above as welding servitors repaired conduits larger than tanks. Rivers of molten metal flowed beneath transparent grates, their glow casting trembling reflections on our faces. I thought I was ready for what I would see. I wasn't. They called it the Furnace of Redemption. It was not a single furnace, but an endless network of industrial pits, smelting the planet's core minerals into material for the Imperium's endless wars. The heat was unbearable, and yet thousands of prisoners worked bare-skinned beside it, hammers in hand, bodies glistening with sweat and grime. Chains linked their ankles, limiting every movement. Above them, servo drones drifted, monitoring production, ready to punish laggards with bursts of searing light. We were assigned to a section at the far end of the chamber. My task was simple: move slag from one trough to another. The motion was endless: lift, carry, drop, over and over until muscle blurred into pain. Time meant nothing here. The overseers walked the lines, whispering prayers into their vox grills. Through labor we serve. Through pain, we are reborn. The words lost meaning after a while. They became rhythm, another sound among the many grinding layers of this infernal place. Hours or maybe days passed before I realized I was whispering the prayers too. It was easier that way. To resist meant remembering, and memory was dangerous. During a rare pause, I glanced at the prisoner beside me, a gaunt woman with hollow eyes and a shaven head. Her skin was gray from ash, but her gaze burned with something strange, hope maybe, or madness. She noticed me watching and spoke in a cracked whisper, her voice trembling like broken glass. "They say the Emperor's light reaches even here." I almost laughed, but no sound came out. She smiled faintly, as if she'd expected that reaction. "But it's not the light that saves us. It's the darkness that hides us from his gaze." Before I could answer, an overseer's shadow fell across us. He raised his baton and the woman went silent. The blow came fast and she crumpled without a sound. They dragged her away and her blood marked the floor where I stood. I went back to work. That night, when the sirens signaled the rest period, we were led into the barracks. Low stone tunnels filled with rows of iron bunks. There were no lights, only the dull glow from furnaces bleeding through cracks in the walls. I lay down on a thin metal sheet, my back still raw from the brand. Around me, the others shifted and muttered in restless sleep. Some prayed aloud, others wept quietly. But above it all, beneath the endless hum of machinery, I began to hear something else, a rhythm that didn't belong to the engines. A faint pulsing sound like a heartbeat deep in the stone. I told myself it was the heat, the echo of machinery. Anything but what it truly sounded like, because if I was right, the planet itself was alive. Sleep on Karth 9 was never real sleep. It was a kind of drifting, a shallow half-dream between exhaustion and survival. The furnaces never stopped roaring. The air itself seemed to pulse with heat. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that same thudding rhythm through the metal frame beneath me, a heartbeat buried somewhere below. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the echo of machinery or the pounding in my own chest, but it came from deeper, too slow, too steady to be human. When the shift horn screamed for the next labor cycle, I sat up and found the others still stirring. Most were too broken to care about anything beyond the next breath. I kept the sound to myself. They herded us out again, chains clinking, boots dragging. The corridors between the barracks and the furnace were narrow and slick with condensation. Every surface sweated as though the planet itself bled heat. We passed under arches lined with skulls, each one tagged with a serial number. The skulls weren't trophies, they were record keepers. The overseers said every worker who failed to meet quota earned a place among them. That morning, or maybe it was night, my section was assigned to maintenance duty near the lower shafts. The descent tunnels went deeper than anyone liked to think about. Each level down was hotter, darker, and quieter until even the clang of the upper machines faded into a distant hum. We carried lamps that sputtered and hissed in the bad air, their light barely pushing back the gloom. "Stay close," the enforcer barked. No straying from line. No speech. We obeyed. But as we reached the fourth descent gate, the hum changed again. I felt it underfoot, stronger now, rhythmic, alive. Even the dust seemed to tremble with it. The others noticed too. Faces turned, eyes wide with something close to recognition or fear. A guard struck the nearest prisoner across the back with his baton. "Move," he hissed, "or you'll feed the pit." We moved. The tunnels narrowed into a series of iron walkways suspended over a vast shaft. Far below, rivers of molten ore glowed like veins of fire. The air shimmered with heat distortion. I could hear the dull thud of hammers, the hiss of vents, and beneath it all the same pulsing, steady beat, as though the heart of the world itself was beating against the chains that held it. Halfway across, one of the lamps went out. In that instant of darkness, someone screamed. A shape moved, fast, low, too large to be human. Then the lamp flared again, and there was nothing there but empty metal. The guards didn't even pause. "Keep moving," one said flatly, his vox grill buzzing. Miners see things. The furnace plays tricks, but I had seen something. A shadow in motion, a shape that didn't belong in this realm of heat and steel. It wasn't the warp's whisper. It felt older, heavier. When we reached the maintenance alcove, we began clearing the slag vents. The work was simple. Knock loose the hardened residue, check for blockages, move on. But my hands kept trembling. That rhythm was still there, and I could feel it through the handle of my hammer. By the time the cycle ended, the guards ordered us back toward the lifts. I lingered, pretending to adjust my chain. The others filed away, their silhouettes fading into the red mist. When I was alone, I knelt beside one of the slag vents and pressed my palm to the floor. The heartbeat was there, slow, immense, echoing up through the stone. And then, something answered it. It wasn't sound. It was a feeling, like pressure behind the eyes. A whisper that wasn't a voice but a presence. For an instant, my mind filled with images I couldn't understand. Vast caverns, shapes of light and bone, the sound of chanting in a language I didn't know. When I opened my eyes, my hand was bleeding. The metal beneath my palm had grown hot enough to sear the skin. I stumbled back, gasping. My vision swam. The heartbeat had stopped. I rejoined the line before the guards noticed, my burned hand hidden beneath the folds of my rags. As we rose back toward the upper levels, I caught a final glimpse of the darkness below. For the first time since my arrival, I wished the Emperor would not see me. Back in the barracks, I said nothing. But that night, as the others drifted into restless dreams, I lay awake listening. The heartbeat did not return, but something else did. A whisper, low, faint, beneath the sound of the furnaces. My name. The labor of the damned. By the time I awoke, the heartbeat had vanished. Only the endless thrum of machines remained, gnawing at the walls and at our minds. The overseer's horns howled through the tunnels, and the guards pulled us from our bunks before the glow from the furnaces had dimmed. The heat never faded here. It clung to the skin like guilt. We were fed something that might once have been food, gray paste dispensed from rusted pipes into dented tin bowls. It had no taste, no texture, only purpose. Men would trade it for water, water for silence, and silence for another hour of life. I ate mine slowly, not because I wanted to, but because I feared the emptiness that came after. Hunger was easier to manage than thought. The work shifts were endless, without beginning or end, as if time itself refused to pass here. We labored beneath the furnace, where slag rivers carved glowing scars through the stone. The roar of molten ore drowned out everything, speech, memory, even prayer. The guards didn't need to threaten us anymore. Fear had become a rhythm, embedded in our muscles, a memory older than words. One of the prisoners near me, a man they called Marek, had been here longest. His eyes were milky, his skin marked with burns shaped like symbols, some devotional, others disciplinary. He swung his hammer with mechanical precision, each strike as measured as a heartbeat. After a while, I noticed he mouthed something with every blow. Through the pain, he whispered, "The Emperor knows us." When I asked how long he'd been here, he laughed without sound. "Long enough for the stones to speak back," he said, and turned away. The overseers marched among us, their armor gleaming in the red light. Their faces were hidden behind glass masks engraved with scripture. They never raised their voices. They didn't have to. Their presence alone kept us moving. Behind them, servitors shuffled in neat lines, their metal hands carrying data slates filled with production tallies. If a worker slowed, a servitor would stop beside him, record the failure, and move on. Later, the enforcers would come for the punishment. That day, the heat grew worse. A vent above our section burst open, flooding the air with molten sparks. The guards didn't halt the work. They told us to keep moving. 2 men caught fire before the emergency shutters slammed down. The rest of us dragged their bodies aside. The flames were smothered, but the stench lingered, a mix of burnt oil and flesh. I don't know why that was the moment something inside me broke. Maybe it wasn't grief. Maybe it was the simplicity of it. The idea that we could burn and the work would go on as though nothing had happened. The Imperium didn't need our souls. It needed our ashes. During the next rest cycle, I sat alone at the edge of the slag trough, watching the molten streams twist and split like living veins. The light reflected off the ceiling in trembling patterns, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes within it. Figures kneeling, arms raised, their faces hidden. I blinked and they were gone. The whisper returned. Not words this time, only presence, cold familiar like a memory brushing against my thoughts. I pressed my burned hand against my chest and felt the scar throb with it. Merrick came up behind me, silent as dust. "You feel it too," he said. I didn't answer. He knelt beside me, his voice barely audible over the furnace. "They built this world on something older than industry. The stone remembers. The heat, it feeds it. That's why we never stop. It's not just ore they're extracting." I turned to him. "Then what is it?" He smiled, teeth darkened by soot. "Faith, despair, call it what you like. Every scream, every death, something takes it." He tapped his temple. "You can hear it if you listen long enough." The Emperor's silence, the echo beneath his light. Before I could ask more, a guard's shadow fell across us. "Back to work," he ordered. Marek rose slowly, his expression serene. I watched him return to his line, each swing of his hammer in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat I could still feel pulsing through the ground. When the cycle ended, I found a small piece of metal near the slag channel. Someone had etched the Imperial Aquila into it, uneven, trembling lines as if carved by desperate hands. But beneath the twin-headed eagle, another symbol had been scratched out. I traced it with my fingers, and though I didn't recognize it, I felt something move inside me like memory stirring. That night, I dreamed of wings made of iron, burning as they fell into fire. And when I woke, the heartbeat was closer. The next few cycles blurred together like smoke. There were no days here, only the rhythm of work, pain, and the moments in between when our minds tried to remember sunlight. But something had changed. The heartbeat beneath the stone. It was no longer distant. Now it pulsed in time with the machinery, as if the world itself had begun to breathe. Among the prisoners, rumors spread like rot. They spoke of men who vanished into the tunnels and then returned changed. Their eyes burned with faith too bright for this place. They called themselves the Redeemed. The Redeemed worked harder than anyone, never tiring, never speaking. They obeyed the overseers without question, and yet the guards feared them. Some said they heard voices from the vents. Others said they saw light where no fire burned. One night, as I rested near the slag pit, I saw one of them, a tall, hollow man with pale eyes that seemed to glow faintly through the ash. He stood at the edge of the furnace and stared into the molten river for a long time. Then he turned toward me. His lips moved, but I heard his words inside my head. "The Emperor does not forget his sinners. Only those who stop believing." I froze. My tongue felt heavy, my chest tight. When I blinked, he was gone. Only the glow of the furnace remained and the sound of the heartbeat echoing in the vents above. The next rotation, something unusual happened. The overseers gathered us in the main chamber, a cathedral of steel, carved from stone and soot. Above the furnace, a great icon of the Imperial Aquila hung suspended by chains. Its wings spread wide and dripping with condensation. Beneath it stood a preacher, a thin, skeletal man wearing a torn robe blackened by soot. He spoke with a voice that carried like thunder in a tunnel. "Brothers of the flame. The Emperor tests you not to destroy but to purify. Every lash, every wound, every scream, a prayer in his divine tongue." The crowd of prisoners bowed, murmuring prayers through cracked lips. But not all of them prayed. Some only stared, some wept without sound, and a few smiled. The preacher's gaze found me. For a moment I thought he could see through me, through the burns, through the fear, into the secret thought I had been hiding. That maybe. The Emperor wasn't watching. He smiled faintly as if he had heard me. Then he whispered, "Faith is the only chain that cannot be broken." And the heartbeat beneath the ground thundered so loud that I felt my bones tremble. That night I couldn't sleep. I heard whispers in the vents, soft voices calling my name. I followed them into the tunnels, past the cooling ducts and old mining shafts sealed with rusted symbols. At the far end of a narrow corridor, I found a door, half-buried, ancient, its metal warped and blackened. A single phrase was carved into it in High Gothic, though much of it had been scratched away. Where faith dies, the machine wakes. The heartbeat came from behind it, slow, steady, waiting. I wanted to turn back. But something, curiosity, madness, fate, pulled me closer. I pressed my ear to the cold surface, and through the steel I heard it whisper, "You are not the first." The machine that breathes. The heartbeat never stopped after that night. Even when the furnaces slept, even when the overseers left the pits to count their rations or drink their amasec, I could still feel it. Deep below, steady, patient, alive. Marek noticed it too. He'd been watching me since the sermon, his face pale and drawn, his eyes darting toward the floor every time the pulse shook the chains. We spoke in whispers, careful not to let the servitors hear. "Have you felt it?" he asked one cycle, his voice trembling. "Like something's under us?" I nodded. He leaned closer, the glow from the furnace painting half his face red. "They say the redeemed are taken down there," he whispered. "Below the foundries. They don't come back. Not as men." At first I thought it was just fear talking, the kind that grows in places without sunlight. But when the next work shift ended, we saw two redeemed standing at the gates to the lower tunnels, silent, their bodies trembling like machinery trying to remember how to breathe. They carried no weapons. They didn't need any. Every man who looked into their eyes turned away. The tunnels beneath the Manufactorum were forbidden, sealed by the Administratum decades ago after a reactor breach, or so the guards claimed. But rumors spread that the breach had never been repaired, only contained. And now with every cycle the heartbeat grew louder. Marek had an idea. We would slip into the old shafts during shift rotation, when the alarms reset for calibration. If caught, they'd feed us to the slag furnaces. But curiosity is a stronger flame than fear. That night, we followed the sound. The tunnels were narrow, the walls dripping with condensation that smelled of oil and blood. Pipes hissed like serpents. Old warning runes flickered in red light, half erased by soot and time. At one junction, we found something strange. A row of candles still burning. Someone had been here recently. Symbols of the Aquila were scratched into the stone, but their shape was wrong, bent, distorted like wings torn apart. We pressed on. The deeper we went, the stronger the pulse became until I could feel it in my teeth. The air was hot and heavy, and somewhere far ahead, a low chant echoed through the pipes, voices rising and falling like waves against the metal walls. When we finally reached the chamber, we realized it was no reactor. It was a cathedral, not one built for worship above ground, but carved into the living rock beneath the planet's skin. Every surface was lined with cables, tubing, and bone. Human spines were fused into the conduits, skulls hollowed out and wired together in long strings that vanished into the shadows above. In the center stood a massive cylinder of glass and steel, breathing. With every slow exhale, vapor rolled across the floor. Inside something moved. Marek's hand found mine. "Throne preserve us," he whispered. Through the glass a face turned, or what was left of one. Its features were half human, half machine, a fusion of flesh, brass, and rusted tubing. Dozens of cables fed into its skull. Its eyes were sealed with metal plates engraved in High Gothic prayers. And still it breathed. Each exhalation sent ripples through the chamber, the same rhythm we'd felt in the floors above. It wasn't just the heart of this world. It was the world. Carved on the dais beneath the cylinder were the words, "For every sin a soul, for every soul a spark." The machine that breathes was not a reactor. It was a penance engine. 1,000 prisoners fed into it every rotation. Their minds stripped, their bodies wired, their essence converted into power for the manufactorum above. Faith and pain recycled into energy, and the redeemed, they were its caretakers. Chosen, emptied, refilled. Marek fell to his knees, whispering a prayer through clenched teeth. But I could not speak. I could only stare, and because in that dim, steaming light I saw something inside the glass. A face. My face, it was faint like a reflection through water, but it was there, and it was smiling. I didn't scream when I saw my own reflection in that glass cylinder. The sound caught somewhere between my chest and my throat, like a broken transmission lost in static. Marek was still kneeling, eyes locked on the floor, whispering the same prayer over and over as though repetition could erase what we had seen. The chamber hummed around us, a deep, steady vibration that rattled the chains overhead and made the candles tremble. The breathing of the machine was slow now, tired, as if aware of our intrusion. I could feel the heat radiating from it, waves of metallic warmth washing over my face. Every exhale smelled of oil and iron and blood. I stepped closer, each movement echoing against the steel and bone. Inside the glass, the figure shifted again. Not an illusion, not a reflection. It was alive. A thin, mechanical arm moved inside the tangle of tubes, weak, trembling. And for the briefest moment, I thought it was reaching toward me. Something deep within the walls answered with a low groan, like an engine waking from a long sleep. The flickering lumen lights above brightened, and I saw them, rows of others half fused to the machinery. Bodies stretched into the conduits, faces frozen in silent prayer. Their lips twitched with every pulse of the machine, mouthing the same words, endlessly repeated. For the Emperor, we burn. For the Emperor, we breathe. I stumbled back, almost tripping over a line of cables running along the floor. They pulsed faintly like veins. Marek grabbed my arm. His skin was cold, slick with sweat. Do you see it? He whispered. They're still alive, and he was right. Beneath the glass, the bodies were still moving. Faint twitches, small spasms of muscle as energy rippled through them. They weren't corpses. They were batteries. The redeemed weren't caretakers. They were harvesters. Every cycle, the weakest of us disappeared. Those who couldn't swing the hammers, who collapsed under the heat, who lost their faith, they were taken below. Not executed. Repurposed. Turned into fuel for the machine that kept the manufactorum running and, by extension, the Empire itself. I wanted to believe this was heresy, a violation of everything the Imperium claimed to be. But another part of me, the part that had been beaten and burned and starved for years, whispered the truth. This was not heresy. This was faith made efficient. A sound behind us made me turn. One of the redeemed stood in the tunnel's mouth, tall, thin, his skin gray under the flickering lights. His eyes were gone, replaced by small lenses that clicked as they focused on us. In his hand he held a branding iron shaped like the Aquila, still glowing red from the forge. He didn't speak. Instead, the machine did. Its voice crawling through the vents, a chorus of layered whispers that pressed against the inside of my skull. Sin must become service. Flesh must become function. Faith must be fed. The redeemed stepped forward. Marek tried to run, but the man moved faster than I thought possible. He seized Marek by the throat and pressed the burning iron to his chest. The smell of charred flesh filled the chamber. Marek screamed once, a short, sharp sound, and then fell silent. I reached for him, but his body convulsed violently. His skin darkened, veins bulging, then bursting as tiny cables began to crawl from the wounds. They writhed like living things seeking connection. Within seconds he was gone, swallowed by the same machinery that surrounded us. I fled. I don't remember the direction, only the heat, the stench, the endless whisper of the machine echoing inside my skull. By the time I reached the upper tunnels, my legs were numb, my mind hollow. The heartbeat had followed me up. Now it pulsed in sync with my own. When I returned to the foundry, no one looked at me. No one ever looked at anyone for long on this world. The overseers barked orders. The prisoners swung their hammers. And the furnace burned. As if nothing had happened, only one of the redeemed stood near the gates watching me. His expression unreadable, his lips moving silently. And I realized he wasn't mouthing a prayer. He was counting the time it would take before the machine called me back. The Emperor's silence. The days that followed blurred into one long breath of ash and fire. I worked, I slept, I woke, and somewhere between each heartbeat I waited for the machine to remember me. Every strike of my hammer felt like an echo from that chamber below. Each spark that leapt from the forge seemed to carry Marek's voice, trapped inside the flame. The overseers shouted as always, but I barely heard them. The world had become a single tone, the deep vibration of the heart beneath our feet. Sometimes it grew softer, almost tender, like the pulse of something sleeping. Sometimes it roared so loudly that dust rained from the ceilings and men fell to their knees, praying to be spared another quake. And every time it shook the ground, I felt it inside my ribs, reminding me that the machine was still breathing. I stopped praying. Not out of rebellion, but exhaustion. The words felt hollow, spent, burned away by years of repetition. If the Emperor heard us, why had he let this place exist? If he saw us, why did his light never reach the surface of this world? One night I wandered beyond the sleeping quarters, down a corridor sealed off since before my arrival. The walls were marked with warnings and sigils of protection drawn in dried blood. I carried a flickering lumen stick and a stolen key that I had taken from a dead overseer's belt. It fit the lock perfectly, almost as if it had been waiting for me. The air inside was cold, not the warmth of furnaces or the wet heat of machinery, but the chill of something forgotten. At the end of the passage, I found a small chamber lit by a single servo skull, hovering motionless in the dark. Its optics flickered weakly, projecting faint light across the walls. There, beneath a layer of dust, hung a tattered Imperial banner. The aquila faded, one wing torn, the other smeared with oil. Beneath it lay an altar of stone. Upon that altar rested a data slate, its surface cracked, its runes dim. When I touched it, the skull stirred, its vox grill releasing a burst of static. Then a voice, faint, distant, broken by centuries of decay. If any loyal servant hears this, know that the Emperor is silent. His light does not reach this world. The throne feeds upon our faith, but this place feeds upon our flesh. I froze. The words echoed like blasphemy and truth intertwined. The voice continued, halting, filled with despair. We were sent to build a prison. Instead, we built a shrine. The Adeptus Mechanicus bound a fragment of something holy, or damned, beneath the surface. They said it would purify the sinners through service. But it grows. It learns, then silence. Only the faint hum of the servo skull circling slowly, its optics dimming again. I stared at the slate, my breath trembling. A fragment of something holy, or damned. Had the tech priest trapped a piece of the Emperor himself here? Or something that pretended to be him? The thought hollowed me out. I wanted to throw the slate away, to erase the words, but my hands wouldn't obey. Instead, I clutched it to my chest like a relic. When I stepped back into the main hall, the world seemed sharper. The light harsher, the sound of chains louder, the heat more alive. I could feel eyes on me, the redeemed standing motionless along the walls, their lenses glowing faintly red. They knew. They always knew. One of them spoke, his voice dry, almost human. The Emperor is never silent. It is you who have stopped listening. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me in the smoke. But even after he vanished, his words clung to the air like ash. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had stopped listening. Or maybe the only thing speaking here was the machine itself, wearing the voice of faith to keep us from seeing what we truly served. That night, when I lay down to sleep, I could still hear the heartbeat, but now it was whispering a name. My name, sleep, had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the darkness hummed with life. The same slow rhythm that once hid beneath the stone now thrummed inside my skull. It wasn't just the sound anymore. It was language. At first it came as fragments, single words, shapes of thought without voice or tongue. But over time it grew clearer. And one night, as the furnaces roared above and the prisoners moaned in their restless dreams, I finally understood what the machine was whispering. It was calling me. I sat up, drenched in sweat. The air tasted of metal and ozone, thick with the tang of promethium smoke seeping from the vents. Somewhere beyond the dormitory walls, the alarms pulsed once, a low, distant wail, and then went silent again. I waited, heart pounding until I could no longer tell whether it was my own pulse or the machine's I was hearing. Then I stood, and followed the sound. The corridors were empty, not abandoned, but expectant. Steam hissed from the pipes, swirling around me in ghostly shapes. The lumen lights flickered with every step, casting the walls in long shadows that bent and twisted like things alive. The voice guided me downward, past the foundries, the storage cells, the cooling vents where workers were forbidden to go. Every door I passed seemed to open before me with a soft click, as if the locks recognized something in me. By the time I reached the lowest levels, the air had changed. It was heavy, wet, almost liquid, every breath thick with oil and ash. I could feel the heartbeat again, louder now, echoing in my ribs. But beneath it, another sound had joined, a soft, rhythmic whisper like chanting heard through water. I turned a corner and froze. The redeemed were gathered there, dozens of them, kneeling in a wide circle around a pit that glowed faintly with amber light. Their hands were pressed to the ground, their heads bowed low. They were praying, not to the Emperor, to the machine. Their voices were unified, calm, mechanical, each word perfectly timed with the pulse beneath the floor. We are the flame. We are the fuel. We are the silence between his breaths. I stayed hidden in the shadows, but one of them raised his head. His eyes, or what replaced them, glowed brighter as he tilted toward me. He spoke softly without moving his lips. You have heard it too. I stumbled backward, but the others didn't react. They remained kneeling, still chanting. The one who had spoken stood slowly and approached me, his movements precise, almost reverent. He was taller than the rest, his body crisscrossed with faint glowing lines beneath his skin, like circuits pulsing with weak energy. Why? I managed to whisper. Why me? He paused. Then gently he reached out his hand and touched my chest and right over my heart. His fingers were cold. Because you still believe? The word struck me harder than any blow. Did I? After all I had seen, after all I had done to survive, was belief still burning somewhere inside me, faint but unextinguished? Or was that exactly what the machine wanted? The redeemed turned toward the pit and gestured for me to look. Inside I saw movement, something vast and writhing, hidden just beneath the surface of the light. A mass of metal and flesh, thousands of cables shifting like tendrils connecting to shapes that might once have been human. The glow pulsed with every breath it took. It needs faith to live, the redeemed said. It cannot burn without belief, and I understood then. This was no mere reactor. It was a god in chains, nor the echo of one, surviving on the faith of the damned. The Emperor's name had become its mask. Our prayers its power source. A surge of anger burned through me. This is blasphemy, I hissed. The redeemed tilted his head. Then why do you listen? He asked, and I had no answer. The machine's whisper grew stronger, filling the chamber, vibrating in the marrow of my bones. It wasn't words anymore, it was invitation, promise, an offer wrapped in mercy. Be still, it said inside my skull, and I will make your suffering holy. The redeemed stepped aside, revealing a stairway descending into the pit's light. Go, he murmured. It waits for you. I stared at the steps. They pulsed faintly as if alive. Somewhere beneath them, the heart of this world and the source of all the heat, the pain, the faith, was waiting. For me. The heart beneath Terra's shadow. The steps led downward for what felt like an eternity. Each one sighed under my weight, exhaling faint streams of steam that smelled of rust and burnt incense. The deeper I went, the more the world above seemed to dissolve. The cries, the forges, the endless hammering, all fading into a hum that pressed gently against my skull. At the bottom, the air shimmered with heat. I stepped into a cavern so vast I could not see its walls. Every surface glowed faintly with lines of golden light, flowing like veins through stone and metal. And at the center, half buried in a cradle of machinery, lay the heart, a sphere of polished brass and living tissue the size of a fortress. It pulsed slowly, each beat sending tremors through the ground. Every pulse was echoed by 1,000 smaller machines, their gears turning, their pistons sighing in perfect harmony. The sound was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. I felt my knees weaken. It was like standing before a god. The voice returned, not from the walls, but from inside me. You came to find the Emperor. You found his breath. I took another step forward. The surface of the heart rippled as though sensing my presence. Shapes moved within it, faces forming and fading, mouths opening in silent prayer. I saw Merrick among them, and others too, hundreds of others, men and women whose names I'd never known, all merged into one eternal pulse. They serve still, the voice murmured. Their faith sustains the light you love. I shook my head, my throat dry. You are not him. The heart's glow deepened. For an instant I felt a wave of warmth roll over me. Not heat, but memory. The scent of incense. The sound of a choir I'd once heard as a child on a world that no longer existed. The taste of clean air. It felt like the Emperor's mercy. But mercy doesn't whisper. Mercy doesn't feed. Without me, it said, the light dies. The throne grows cold. The stars go dark. The words filled me with dread. If what it claimed was true, if even a fraction of its power reached Terra, then this abomination might not be confined to a single world. It might be part of something far greater, hidden across the Imperium like veins in the body of a dying god. I stepped closer, until I could feel its warmth on my skin. The surface of the heart quivered. A tendril of golden light reached out, not touching but hovering inches from my chest. "Kneel," it whispered, "and be made whole." For a moment I wanted to. The thought of ending the pain, the hunger, the endless labor, it was a temptation that wrapped around my mind like silk. But then I saw Marek's face again, half fused in the glow, his eyes empty. And I remembered what the machine made of those who believed too much. "No," I breathed. The tendril paused. The glow around the heart dimmed as though the thing inside were surprised. Then it spoke, softer now, almost tender. "You misunderstand. Faith is not surrender. Faith is obedience." The floor beneath my feet began to move, the metal trembling, then splitting into segments that rose like the petals of a steel flower. I stumbled back, shielding my eyes as the heart expanded, veins of gold tearing through the walls around it. Light filled the chamber, pure and blinding. And through the glare I saw a figure forming within the heart, human-shaped, cloaked in radiance, its face hidden. It lifted its hand toward me. And for one impossible moment, I thought I was staring at the Emperor himself. The light consumed everything. My eyes burned, my skin prickled, and the hum of machinery rose to a deafening chorus. I could no longer tell where the world ended and I began. The figure inside the heart stood motionless, yet its presence filled every corner of the cavern. When it spoke, the sound was not heard, it was felt, pressing directly against the center of my mind. "You are afraid." The words rang like chimes behind my eyes. I could barely form thoughts, but one truth clawed through the fog. "You're not the Emperor," I whispered. "You're something else." The figure tilted its head, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt it smiling. "Names are for the small. I am what remains when faith forgets its shape." The heart pulsed again, the ground shaking beneath my knees. Streams of molten light ran along the walls, feeding into colossal conduits that vanished upward, toward the surface, toward the skies. My breath caught. Every pulse of that light, every heartbeat, was a message, a signal carried through systems older than memory. The figure's outline rippled like flame. "You call it the Astronomicon," it said. "The beacon that guides your fleets. But what is a beacon without a heart to feed it?" I felt my stomach twist. The heart wasn't just alive, it was connected. The pulses, the rhythm, the golden veins, they weren't confined to this chamber. They ran through the planet itself, maybe through the Imperium's hidden arteries into the void beyond. It wasn't just the labor of millions keeping the Empire alive, it was their souls. I tried to step back, but my body refused to move. The air itself felt heavy, like invisible chains wrapping around my limbs. The voice softened again, coaxing, gentle as silk. "Do not recoil. You are part of this. You always were. Every prayer, every death, every spark of devotion, they all flow into me. Into us. I don't believe you. Belief is irrelevant. Only function matters." And then I saw them. Silhouettes forming in the light, thousands of them. Men, women, soldiers, priests, even children. Some were from the camps, others from long-dead worlds. Their bodies were translucent, their outlines trembling like ghosts caught in a current. They were feeding the heart, drawn by something far stronger than will. Marek's face appeared again, only this time he wasn't silent. His lips moved, his voice echoing faintly through the noise. "It's not death," he said, eyes hollow. "It's continuation." He reached toward me, and his arm dissolved into dust. He screamed. The figure inside the heart spread its hands, and the golden tendrils extended outward, weaving through the air like the fingers of some vast god machine. I felt the pull again, gentle, patient, inevitable. You can join them. Become purpose. The Emperor's light demands fuel. That word, fuel, hit me harder than any blow. The light of the Imperium, the beacon that saved ships from the warp, that guided billions through the stars, it wasn't powered by divine grace. It was powered by us, by suffering, by faith harvested like a crop. "No," I said again, louder this time. "I won't." Something in the chamber shifted. For the first time, the figure hesitated. The lights flickered. The hum faltered. "You would defy eternity? I'd rather die free than live as part of your machine." Silence. Then the figure stepped forward, the radiance dimming, its shape becoming clearer, too clear. Its face was not divine. It was human. Flawed. Worn. A face of metal and scarred flesh, of cables instead of veins, of eyes that burned with mechanical light. It wasn't the Emperor. It was a man-made echo, a construct of faith and circuitry, a reflection of what the Imperium needed to believe still existed. It looked at me almost kindly. "Then you have already died," it said. The ground convulsed. The walls groaned. I ran, blind, choking, stumbling through smoke and light as the heart screamed behind me. Its golden veins cracked, spilling fire into the tunnels. The hum turned into a roar. I didn't look back. When I finally reached the upper corridors, the sound was fading, but the vibration still ran through the walls. It wasn't dying. It was awakening. And in that final, trembling moment, I heard its last whisper through the vox lines that threaded the entire world. "Even rebellion feeds the throne." When I reached the surface, the sky was no longer black. It burned, a sheet of shifting gold and crimson, the color of a dying sun. The ground trembled beneath my boots, and the air was thick with the taste of ash and iron. I turned back toward the horizon, where the manufactorum towers once stood, and saw them collapsing one by one. Great pillars of smoke spiraled upward, carrying with them the screams of the dying and the prayers of the faithful. The heart's pulse still echoed faintly through the earth. It was slower now, weaker, but it had not stopped. Even as its chamber fell, even as the tunnels caved in and the ground split apart, the rhythm persisted, a fading heartbeat beneath the skin of a dying world. I staggered forward, half blind from the smoke. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying the distant chant of the penitents. Some still prayed even now. Others lay silent, faces turned toward the burning sky. I wanted to shout at them, to tell them what I had seen, that the light they worshipped was not salvation but consumption, that their faith was the blade that carved their own throats. But the words never came, because even now, even after everything, I could still feel it calling, that same voice, soft, patient, eternal. "You cannot kill purpose," it whispered. "You can only serve it." I pressed my hands over my ears, but the whisper was inside me now. It lived in the rhythm of my pulse, in the heat that still clung to my skin. The machine hadn't needed to consume me, to claim me. It had already marked me the moment I believed. I looked up toward the heavens, toward the faint, unwavering beam that pierced the clouds and vanished into the void. The Astronomicon, the light that every navigator followed, that every ship trusted. I could see it clearly now, like a wound torn through reality itself. And for the first time I understood what powered it. It wasn't faith alone. It was loss multiplied across millennia. Worlds sacrificed, souls harvested, prayers swallowed whole. Every death in the Emperor's name was another spark in the great flame that burned above Terra. Every sinner and saint alike became kindling for a light that could never go out, and maybe that was the point. Maybe that was the only way humanity could survive, in perpetual sacrifice. The ground shifted beneath me again, and a deep rumble tore through the horizon. The heart's chamber was collapsing completely now. The golden veins that had snaked across the surface were retracting, pulling their light back into the depths. The world was sealing itself shut as though trying to hide what had been revealed. I should have felt relief. I didn't. Because I knew that even if this place died, the others would remain. There were countless worlds like this one, hidden, buried beneath holy names, each with its own heart, each one feeding the same impossible light that stretched all the way to Terra. And if one fell, the others would beat harder to replace it. That was the way of the Imperium. Nothing ends, it only transforms. The storm grew louder. The sky fractured into streaks of gold lightning. I dropped to my knees, clutching the cracked ground as the final pulse surged through the planet like a dying breath. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes again, the light was gone. The sky was empty. Only the stars remained, cold and indifferent. For a long time I sat there, trying to remember the sound of the heart. It was fading from my mind, like a dream unraveling at dawn. But beneath that silence I could still feel something, a faint rhythm, steady, unbroken. I realized it wasn't the planet. It was me, my pulse, still beating in time with the heart. And as I stared at the distant shimmer of the Astronomicon far above, I wondered, if the heart had truly died, why did the stars still burn? Perhaps it hadn't died at all. Perhaps it had simply moved on, Perhaps it was already beneath Terra's golden throne, whispering softly in the Emperor's ear. And if that were true, then the light that guides mankind through the dark is not salvation. It is the echo of something far older and far hungrier than any god we have ever prayed to. The hum of the machine world may fade, but its song endures forever, fade to silence. The light flickers once and dies. The storm has passed now. The fires are gone. Only dust remains where faith once burned bright. I don't know if what I saw was real, or if the warp itself showed me a reflection of humanity's own hunger. But one truth echoes in the silence. The Imperium endures not through mercy, but through memory. Every sacrifice, every prayer, every life lost in the shadows of forgotten worlds becomes part of the Emperor's dream, or his cage if you can still hear my voice across the static. Then the light still burns, somewhere, somehow, and maybe that's enough. If this story stayed with you, if the whispers of the machine still hum in your thoughts, then stand with us. Like this video, share it with another soul who drifts through the dark, and subscribe for more stories buried beneath the stars. Until the next transmission. Sleep well, traveler of the void, and remember the Emperor protects, but not always in the ways we pray for. Fade to black. Low mechanical hum lingers.